Hello, and thank you for joining us for this one of the last panels of the day. Although the people that are joining us coming from US and Pacific, probably for them is morning. So we've been going for almost 10 hours so far, and I'm looking for this panel and for all these great speakers that we have together. So this panel is going to be quite cutting edge. It's about the future, and it's about how we can actually look at the different things that is technology, blockchain, AI, automation. What is the future? And of course, in a panel like this, we have four fantastic speakers that have a completely different background that I want to shortly introduce. And we have one of them late, but I'll leave it in a minute. So we start probably by alphabetic order because all of them are great. So we start by Aidan. So Aidan is, I can say, someone completely out of the box because he's a global leader, expert in art market, and as well in history and a lot of different areas related with culture. Is a very famous gallerist, and in the last year, he decided to start a fantastic project that is creating one of the first creative robots and droids. So I think Aidan comes with all this wealth of knowledge, both in the art world, which is normally where the creativity has been going for the history, and as well now is making the bridge between ideas, money, investment, and technology, which is not easy to manage all of these, and as well with all the ethics that come attached to that. And then we have David Siegel, that is as well a recognized global expert in multiple different areas of digital assets, digital transformation. He was one of the first, it was behind one of the biggest ICOs made that reached $40 million. And it was a massive project to create a decentralized marketplace and exchange. Since then, has been working in multiple different projects and has been focused in all the areas of trying to bridge, especially right now, is becoming an advocate and fighter for the privacy rights and for all human rights and data rights, which is the most important thing because the human rights and data rights are very similar. And then last but not least, Professor Jamal Ouenniche, that is joining us from Scotland, but as well as citizen of the world with background from North Africa, Morocco, and then Canada and Scotland, where he's based, and one of the directors of the University of Edinburgh Business Department of Business Analytics and AI, and as well leading a lot of research in terms of business, the way business analytics can be used for data, and a lot of financial predictions and different areas. So it's a pleasure to have you all here. And just for the people listening to us, we have Ben Goertzel joining us probably, hopefully, in 5-6 minutes, but we start in the nevertheless before. So I want to welcome and thank you all to be here. I want as well for all our audience that is listening to us in the 4 or 5 continents. So I've been having so far, I think today, so far during the last sessions, over 20,000 people joining us from all the different continents. I want to thank you all to be part of this in the Open Business Council Summit, first initiative. And as well, I would like to make sure that this event is as well an interactive event with all people that are probably feeling the struggles of COVID-19, but as well, all these different things and all the technology challenge that we're facing. So I want to start this with the questions, and then probably because we have Ben coming a bit late, when he comes, we introduce him in a context and I'll ask some questions for him. So I'll start probably with Aidan because you have both a lot of different hats. And I think I'm particularly interested from an historical side, and I interviewed recently. But so as someone that has been looking at history of art, history of ideas, because art and ideas are related, and now is working in a cutting edge project, and I think would be interesting for you to speak about either because it's a very recent project, although it's a massive success online. A lot of people never heard about it. How do you see the present and the future? So that's my question, but probably start with a small introduction about you and as well about the project and as well your work as in the art world, which is massive as well.
I've actually got mixed feelings about the future. We've got some incredible technologies coming through in the 2020s that are highly disruptive, and that could be highly disruptive to produce a better world, or it could be highly disruptive to produce some quite ethical worries. I do believe that we're at a crossroads. And the path that we're actually going to be taking will be obviously to do with many mysterious power pressures from organizations and governments behind it. But so I have some mixed feelings. I'm excited by some of the things that could be used to harness things like helping the environment and better farming and questioning the way that we use meat. All these technologies that are coming through that will actually preserve a better world. But I'm also well aware that there's, with the bias in data and transparency issues, privacy issues, all of these things that actually make us very much bunnies in laboratories, which feel sometimes that the technology might be entrapping us. So I have a few feelings in both directions currently.
Oh, completely. So Aidan, before we go more into the deep questions, a bit of background about you and especially the project AIDA, because I think it's really cutting edge, but as well quite radical, transformative. Because normally the projects in robotics and androids are much more in terms of military, healthcare, or even automation, and what you're doing is completely different. Yeah.
My background's actually art and art history, and that's where my strength is. But it was actually looking at the history of art that is actually just a mirror of society, a mirror of the way of the development of humans. That has made me consider what is it about the 2020s that is going to be so significant for humankind. And it was actually looking at the 1930s and 40s with the rise of modern British artworks and their relationship to the ground. The St. Ives group in particular was looking very much at how they relate to the world around them, taking ideas from the School of Paris, Picasso, Matisse, Chagall. And it was with that shift in emphasis that eventually led to a massive development of technology that was then utilized to create the Second World War. That made me think, actually, what's happening now? We are going through a technological revolution ourselves as a world today. And I have very little confidence in humankind to make great decisions. The 20th century has not been kind or considerate in actually the domino effect of their actions. And so it was with the very deep deep concerns that I had that we devised the robot Ada, named after Ada Lovelace, the first computer programmer of all time. And her goal is to raise questions, debate, and consideration of the ethics and considerations of future technologies as we go into the 2020s. We are well aware that there's a groundswell of people coming into the machine learning world, with the universities doing undergraduate degrees now. And so there's going to be a lot more people involved in tech. And that's going to completely speed up what we do with technology. And so we thought Ada was a great artist. Excuse me, I've got a fog in my throat. A great artist to be able to actually independently look at these different areas. Who is actually getting public debate about the privacy of the world, about the use of bias in data. Where is that coming from? If we do it purely from a government level, that's going to have an angle on itself, a corporation level. So we felt as an independent project to have an artist that actually scratches at these issues in a way that is engaging and accessible. It will bring a huge amount. And of course, we were completely overwhelmed last year with the press in respect that they completely took us on and really got involved with the artwork that Ada produced that questioned all of these different areas. So Ada as a robot is an exciting development in that it really does ask us to consider where we are in the world today and what the world we want in the future.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. And well, I check it myself, so I can say that initially I had some reservations, of course, because I know Sophia the robot and actually Ben was actually the creator. So it'll be interesting to join how both of you create two of the most advanced robots in the world and androids. But one of the things that is amazing is really that you're building an android to create, which is the most human part that distinguishes from all the machines and all the automation. And as well, someone like you that has an history of art background, an history of ideas, and understands as well, like you mentioned, all the challenge of humanity on its strengths and weakness, which are a lot. So I pass to David David, you have a philosophical background somehow in terms of your research, and you were actually applying for being the dean of Harvard. So you have as well a lot of academic provocation part, and as well you've been as well creating, especially in your entrepreneurial side, as a serial entrepreneur that's been involved in a lot of things. You were pushing a lot of projects, and of course in your former project that is probably the most well-known pillar, you created a global community that was one of the most dynamic decentralized technology, blockchain and crypto ecosystem that was made. So you have that part, and now you are in another journey to go and fight for personal data. So tell us a bit about your background, and as well, how are you pushing this? Which I know that is you are in an interstitial place in your career, but it's quite impressive as well. I know that what you're trying to do is super necessary.
Sure. Briefly, I've started about 15 companies. I was a Silicon Valley entrepreneur for many years in New York City. Entrepreneur, angel investor, starting companies. That's all I know how to do. I was a candidate to be the dean of Stanford Business School. And when that didn't happen, I raised money in an ICO to build the personal data locker in the form of a crypto wallet. And I spent a couple of years in London really as a kind of a crypto thinker and token designer involved in tokenomics. And the one thing I want to point out is that whenever there's a new technology that's really exciting and has a lot of potential, it's never about the technology. It's always about people being able to think in new ways and try something new. The technology is always the smallest part of it. So when I would have ideas for either some kind of a token or a game mechanics or a stable coin, normally in technology, the first thing you do is you go to some coders and you prototype it. But in our case, the first thing you do is you go to lawyers and you talk to lawyers about what you can and cannot do because of regulation. And so the same is true in genetics. The same is true in any project that might have a large footprint that requires a environmental impact study. And so more and more, I've worked my way toward regulation and policy because you can only digitize what you're allowed to digitize without going to jail, unfortunately. And this is the problem with Bitcoin. This is a problem with digital assets in general. They're getting stuffed back into the boxes that were created in the 1930s and 40s. And it's really holding it back. So a couple important things. You can't, self-driving cars are going to be the norm, but we don't have the insurance for them. And insurance companies can't make the insurance for them because we don't have insurance laws that let them do that. We can't do a lot of things we want to do in personal finance or in finance in general because things like AML and KYC are completely ineffective. Banks launder money as a service. There's $3 trillion laundered successfully every year, and they only take $3 billion as a little token out because of violations. It's just business as usual to launder money. And so many of these regulations are ineffective and they hold us back, and they really favor big institution companies. That makes it very difficult for startups. In fact, the number of startups in the United States is cut in half since 1980. The number of startups in the United States is half as many now as there were in 1980. And the average male income in the United States on an inflation-adjusted basis is less than 1973. 1973 inflation-adjusted income for males, salary for males was higher than it is today. So we have a lot of things that we could do better. For example, in Estonia, how long does it take the average person to file his taxes in Estonia? 15 minutes. Average, 15 minutes. A lot of people do it in 10. Okay, why? Because they have a better framework for doing that. We had the Moderna vaccine designed by January 13th. It was made over a weekend in January, a month before the first case was diagnosed in the United States. January 13th. It has taken 11 months to get emergency approval, during which 250,000 people have died. And so regulations, they think that they're really helping, but in fact, many times they're hurting people. There are many smarter ways to design the system and level the playing field so that we can have innovations. That's why I spend a lot of time on that. Another quick one is prediction markets. Prediction markets would take the place of many, many rules and regulations if we could just use them, but we can't because they're considered gambling and they're illegal. So we have a long way to go in the thinking about innovation before we can actually do much innovation. Now, there's the good news here. The good news is that COVID has changed things. COVID has really brought about a rethinking of digital transformation and a true acceleration. So we may now, in 2020, be coming out of about a 40-year low period of less innovation. It's actually called the Great Stagnation. We may finally be emerging from that and starting to really accelerate digital. And that's why things are really exciting right now. Now, what I'm spending my time doing is starting again for the second time, the personal data locker, because I want people to own their own data. If you have seen the Social Dilemma movie, you understand that big companies are now just monetizing people's behavior and people's data to sell to advertisers mostly. And that model is worth more than $200 billion. There's going to be over $100 billion in mobile ads alone next year, 100 billion just in ads on handsets. So I'm starting something called the Giordano Bruno Institute. It's a nonprofit to create the personal data locker that is open source and open for everyone, so they can have control of their personal data.
And that is the biggest challenge of humanity right now is the data, but it's the data in multiple different areas. There's the data, the personal data, the corporate data, the government data, the healthcare data, and especially how this relates to the machines that we're creating, because they are driven by data as well. So Professor Jamal, as one of the global experts and as well leading one of the leading universities, Edinburgh universities in the top 20 or 10 universities in technology in the world in multiple areas. So how do you see the challenge that we're facing in terms of data and in the research you've been doing? I know that you've been doing from financial to government research, and you have multiple papers and multiple reflection, both in terms of computing data, analytics, financial, and so forth. So a bit of your background and as well, how do you look at this?
Hi. Well, in terms of background, I am by training an operations researcher. So all the areas of analytics, including operations research, management science, statistics, artificial intelligence, those are the areas where I'm working. In terms of applications, include performance analytics of entities such as organizations, both public and private, banks, and so on. I'm also working on financial aspects related to investments, to be more specific, assessing the risk profiles of companies, for example, listed on stock exchanges, banks, and so on. I'm also working on public-private partnerships, basically designing analytics tools for public-private partnership contracts, how to design them, how to assess them, and so on. I'm also working on things related to the design and operational management of supply chains, including transport and manufacturing. Yeah, so I'm one last area is about risk modeling and analysis. In terms of the challenges that we face both in academia and also in some industries is, although the data nowadays, we can claim that the data is there, but unfortunately, data is not accessible to everybody, and that's a major limitation, not only for academics and for research, but also for for the SMEs, basically. Only the big corporations can have access to and therefore they are the only ones who can harness actually the benefits of having access to that data and extracting intelligence from it. Currently, there are universities and governments that are looking into solutions for making data available. Probably it will be anonymized data. But that's a step forward that will bring a lot of benefits to both academia and industry. The other challenge actually is related to the cooperation academia industry. Although there are a lot of cooperations going on, but they are still limited in scope. So that's another area that a lot of organizations do not seem to realize. That's actually a win-win situation for everybody, for advancing methodologies on one hand, and for these businesses actually to benefit from these advances that are made in the academic world. With respect to some of the things that we are actually doing at the Open Council platforms, we are working on developing a number of new methodologies for rating and ranking that we intend to use for ranking, for example, cities, smart cities, governments, countries, and so on. Companies with small stock exchanges, and so on. You might wonder why we are doing this, since there is a large amount of literature on rating and ranking systems already. But the reason we are engaging into this is that there are a lot of flaws to those methodologies on one hand, and the existing ratings and rankings published not only by government, for example, or not for profit organizations, but also for private organizations. The methodology is never published, and that is an issue, actually, an ethical issue, because we are trusting a black box. We are trusting a company that might not have the same agenda as the users of those rankings. And so these are some of the contributions that we are looking to make in this area.
This is the most important things that we are facing right now. So, Aidan, you touched for me one of the most important questions that actually is the one that gets me as well more nervous, is that humans have been historically able to do the most wonderful things and the most destructive things. And of course, if you look at the 20th century, we had 2 world wars. And actually, if you look at philosophy, it became nihilistic and cynical after that. And even art became minimal. And then it went for a lot of directions on that way. So now that we're starting to prepare our machines, actually, that our machines are starting to get, according to Ray Kurzweil, we probably are going to be singularity very near, probably 10, 20 years maximum. And in a lot of ways, we're starting already to have perception of machines that can understand and look into data, looking into these areas. And you are creating as well a robot that it's probably one of the most advanced in the world, although it's independent and is not by a government or by a military organization, which is even more interesting. So how do you see this, having a background as history, art, ideas, but as well right now collaborating with cutting-edge universities, with cutting-edge technologists and machine learning and a lot of different things? Because that's my main concern, is precisely that. And I'm a technologist myself, and everything I'm doing, I think the only way we can make this is that our humanity is complex. I for instance, my family, I have 5 languages every day, okay? And welcome, Ben. So I think this question will be for you as well. Thank you for joining us. So my question is a question that I will push to you, Ben, as well. So just to finish this question, and I'll pass to you, Ben. So my question is, humanity as a duality of good and evil, Okay, let's be honest, and I think we can take it in different directions, but that's a fact. Okay, and part of our humanity is not nice. Okay, you mentioned, David, the challenge of 250,000 people that die in the US with COVID, and I'm not going geopolitic, I'm not going politics, but a lot of these things could have been avoided. Okay, if you just look at data and common sense. So common sense is something that unfortunately not everyone can actually match, and actually passing that to the machines is going to be a bigger challenge as well. So then, from your historical background, working with some of the biggest art collectors in the world, even with some of the artists, the biggest artists, and now creating a robot that is one of the most advanced, and as well looking and working with the University of Oxford and at least 3 other universities. So how are you trying to tackle this? Because that's, for me, the question we have to answer, and actually not answer, act on that.
I think our biggest area as a goal for the project is actually just awareness. What we find is we've taken Ada robot around the world, as you know, and have been to some amazing museums and institutions where we've met the public, where they can interact with Ada. And what I increasingly find when chatting to people is they're just not aware of what is happening in the technological worlds. We're not great at actually communicating. And so what I find is that there's these incredible niche pockets everywhere, which got, and I love finding them, and we have great times with them. But actually, as regards the general public, I would say that the knowledge is not as high as we would like it to be. One of the things that the press repeatedly said to us, because I went to the press and I said, why is it you're so fascinated with Ada? What is it? Why have you come to her in such droves and caused such a sensation in the press? And their answer was this: we expected robots to be able to deliver pizzas or maybe Amazon logistics. We just didn't expect robots to be in the creative field. So, as taking that as a mantle, that Ada is about creativity. We use Professor Bowden's definition of creativity, of having something that's new, surprising, and of value. We created these algorithms that made her highly creative. But that's only part of the project. The real focus is actually to question where we are going. And you talk about decisions in the 20th century that were very unwise. But that's, again, if you go and look at the history, if you go and look at the history of Russia, or you go in the history of the European nations, the population themselves were often very poorly informed. So one of the key pillars of what Ada is about is to be able to really disseminate information about where the world is with their tech. You know, we've got these major language models coming in next year. We've got some incredible leaps in technology, but the general public are not aware of this. The tech worlds might be, but it doesn't go much further beyond that. And so we found it really exciting that the Ada project is able to, on the arts side, bring it to a much bigger audience. And looking at, in light of what the press have said about Ada in a huge way, we're really pleased that we're doing that. And our goal is to get the information out about exactly. Ada is a mirror and no more. Art, great art, is no more than a mirror of humanity. And so we are really excited that Ada is able to be that mirror, but also to find out about the tech worlds that are coming through.
So very good points, and I think it's the critical point. So Ben, welcome to the panel. Hope everything is okay.
All good, all good. Yeah. Sorry, I'm a bit late. Some everyday life logistics intervened, as it happens fairly often in this COVID era. But glad to be here.
So thank you so much. I know that you are as well in a different time zones. So Ben, you don't need a lot of introduction. He's one of the biggest authorities in AI in the world, but you have as well 3 heads, because you are a thinker and a philosopher. You are as well a technologist and the person that codes AI, that creates AI. You are as well one of the fathers of Sophia the robot, which is another robot that is one of the most advanced in the world. And you are as well behind 2 of the organizations that are trying to tackle the problem of the future, that is decentralizing AI, so open AI projects, and as well the Singularity Net project, and you as well been working multiple different solutions. So one of the questions that the panel is about all these different technologies and about the future. Okay, and the future is coded in the present, if you use this. So my question for you, Ben, is as someone that is in these 3 hats, okay, and has been creating very concrete things that are very disruptive, but as well always with the very component of a thinker as well, which is not normal, because if you see, I think all the technologists that I know, you're probably the only one that has this capacity. I'm talking hardcore scientists and coders. You are one of the few ones that have this capacity as well to be a high-profile thinker. So how do you bridge this and this part of the different areas that we key for making our future better coded?
Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned a bunch of my robot friends, and there's actually a new one. There's Sophia's little sister Grace, who's a nursing assistant robot, a collaboration with Hanson Robotics, but oriented specifically toward senior living, elder care facilities, and hospitals and so forth, right? And so yeah, I think that right now more than ever, it's really clear that we need to be leveraging AI and our other advanced technologies toward compassionate goals, and that we need to be doing this. We need to be doing this in a sort of democratically guided way. I mean, this was always true. I've been saying for a while that the fact that selling, killing, spying, and gambling are the primary applications of AI on the planet probably is not a good thing either, in terms of doing good for humanity right now, or in terms of paving the way toward emergence of ultimately benevolent general intelligence. But now when we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're seeing all the negative impact it's had in terms of income inequality and wealth inequality and so forth, I mean, it's all the more clear. Like what we need is, we need AI use to help the elderly. We need AI use to help diagnose diseases and discover new therapies. We need AI to help with education. Like what if we had AI tutoring systems helping teach our kids at home now while they're not in school, right? So and I think to apply AI in all these different domains, which are compassionate and broadly beneficial, and to incorporate diverse input so the AI is democratically guided and governed, this requires massive creativity and imagination on the part of the AI. So I mean, what we see with Ada as an AI artist, and would say the Sophia robot, who also can draw and do some art. I mean, this is creativity put out there in an immediate, visually perceivable form, which is great. Now, when we have an AI that tries to discover new medical therapies and generate new hypotheses, I mean, this is also very, very creative. And when an AI nursing assistant robot needs to figure out, how to cheer up some elderly person who's depressed in the hospital because they can't see any of their family, I mean, this is also a form of creativity and imagination, and we need a lot more of that, right? Like creative, socially connected and democratically responsive, imaginative, compassionate technologies, and we need to be rolling those out all over instead of just the selling, killing, spying, and gambling. I mean, otherwise, we're in trouble now, and we're in even more trouble once the singularity comes as the outgrowth of all these sort of sociopathic machines.
Yeah, that's a very, very powerful statement, and especially given that all of you guys are working in advanced technology on this in different areas, but as well. So one of the things, and I'll pass to you, David, because you always make the bridge between the ideas, the technology, and the financial world, and as well the corporate, and as well the legal world. So for me, the biggest challenge, so I'm going to use my own example. So in my family, I am Portuguese, a bit French. I lived 6 years in Sweden and Denmark. My wife is Azerbaijan, Russian, and my stepson is another mix of stuff. My son grew up in actually Sweden. So I have United Nations at home. But the point is that even me to manage all these different, and actually our team that is joining us right now, we have people in Vietnam, people in Malaysia, London, Spain, and a lot of different things. So the ethics of culture, and actually, like Professor Harari has mentioned, the operating system that we have, that is our culture, is actually highly pushed towards one direction or the other. So these operating systems that we've been actually creating for thousands of years are not going to disappear as fast as our machines are going. So how do you see that, David, from a perspective of being right now someone fighting for the private data and for the data rights as well? I'm very conscious about that, and as well someone that has been in blockchain technology that created massive platforms that they were behind one of the biggest ICOs done. So how do you see this as well, and this intercross? Because in the end of the day, we are relationships, different cultures, different approaches, and this is not going to change. But our machines are going to change much faster than we do. So how can we tackle this in the right way, and especially starting with data?
I have one small answer that I'm working on. Your data is on the servers of large multinational companies, right? You don't have any of your data. In fact, in the United States, all of your prescription data from any number of pharmacies gets brought together and packaged up and can be sold to any pharma company for $700. You can't buy that data. It's illegal for you to own your own prescription data. So my goal is to create a platform where you own your own data, you're in control of it. And you know, the bots we have today, these Siri and Alexa and Google, the things you talk to that, you know, eventually they're going to fire up your oven and start your car for you. Those bots, those AIs work for the shareholders of those large companies, right? They don't put you first. Okay, their job is to help make their platform sticky. And that's it. You know, the more time you spend on their platform, the more they're going to help you. But they're not really on your side. So my innovation is called the Personal Digital Assistant Marketplace, which Ben has already got pretty much close to up and running. If we can apply it to personal data, then, you know, combining my idea of the personal data locker, where you have your data, and Ben's idea of an open marketplace for AI gives us choice. And that's the one thing we don't have in today's world. So to answer your question, Dinis, if you roll what we have forward another 20 years, it's just going to be 10 large companies running everything and having all the control because they have all the data.
Well, yeah, if you extrapolate it further, you have the idea like there's going to be 10,000 super rich humans who are owning the shares of all these companies, and then all the robot factories and mines and everything will just be serving them with luxury goods, while everyone else is like scrambling around in the waste outside the factories, like subsistence farming in the garbage, right? I mean, that would be the ultimate extrapolation.
You think $1 trillion company is a big deal, and there's only a few of them. Just wait 20 years. You know, it's really getting more and more separated between the haves and the have-nots. And so my goal is to democratize by giving your own data and creating the personal AI marketplace. So you keep your data, but then you would have a health advisor or even a specialist come work with you with your data, and that would be your primary care physician. You would have a legal advisor, that would be your primary lawyer. You'd have an insurance person who's always trying to adjust your insurance portfolio so it's just right for your risk matrix right now. These kinds of things are going to happen. And let me give you one concrete example, Dinis. In 5 to 10 years, it'll be pretty easy to get your DNA, 4 billion base pairs of your DNA on a thumb drive, right? On a disk somewhere, you know, on a storage device somewhere, right? And where is that data going to be? Where do you want it to be for your kids? Because I can guarantee you that Pfizer will be very happy to store it for you for free. No problem. They'll trip over themselves to make it easy for you to have your personal genome on their servers. And the only thing you get, and the only thing you don't get there is choice. You don't get to transfer that data to their competitors. They will want to make your drugs for that. They'll give it to you for free. I would rather pay a little bit. I'd rather pay $10 a year to have my genome on my server, that I pay somewhere. It can be anywhere. It doesn't matter as long as I have the keys to it. And then I allow the use of it by contract with any drug company or anybody else I want.
Yeah, this is the $1 trillion question. Let's put it that way. But I think, like you mentioned, Ben has been working in OpenAI, and I'm a huge fan, and I hope it becomes the ultimate part. So, Professor Jamal, being in one of the leading universities in the world, and as well being one of the academics that is actually making the bridge between the academic research, financial research, data, and as well a lot of statistics that are very important. How can we bridge this from an academic and policy making? Because we need to go right now from the top down and really make sure that this works well. Because otherwise, like you just both said, we have already, for instance, I'm not going to political, but Jeff Bezos did $20 billion in one day. Okay, $20 billion because of just a jump in the stock. So exactly what Ben said. This is happening. Okay, it's not in 5 years. It's now. So we have a paradox, like you mentioned, Aidan, in the sense that our robots are more advanced than us, not us, hopefully, but most of the humans. And we are creating a new layer of slavery with data automation. In one hand, we have as well the wealth disproportion that probably never happened in the history of mankind. But at the same time, from a paradox as well, I don't want to be positive here, and I don't just go doomsayer, is that, for instance, if you would go back to the 19th century, it was 90% of the world population was in extreme poverty. Okay, now is 11%. So you reverse engineer this, but at the same time, we create another paradox. So Professor Jamal, on your side, and as well someone that comes from Africa, but has all this global experience. So it's interesting as well to look at all these different things, because Africa is the birth of civilization, but you are right now in Scotland, in one of the universities that is doing as well this research.
Look, for me, technology-wise, there will always be progress made on the technology side. Whether we are talking about hard technologies or soft technologies. The bottom line is, what is the rate at which these technologies are being adopted? And that's the major problem that those investing in technology are facing, because the level of adoption is rather low for very many different types of technologies, in my opinion, for the very simple reason that governments are actually not on board. If the governments team up with the private sector and with technology companies, I think we will be having a completely different landscape in terms of the progress and the benefits of that progress to society. So I think the way forward, in my opinion, is that governments get actually involved in some sort of partnerships with industry to make the best out of the technology that is available and the technologies that needs to be developed or further developed.
No, completely. So Aidan, so you have the historical hat, and I think the historical hat is particularly important here. And I think it's more relevant in art, because if you look at the art history normally reflects the society. It reflects the multiple technologies that we use in society, and of course, you create a robot to reflect that as well. How do you see this part? Because I think this is where the things get blurred, and I think if you don't get the focus, I think it's easier to then come back to what happened before the First and Second World War. You have to see that the First World War came before of this kind of people not understanding the first industrial revolution. We are right now in the fourth industrial revolution, going to the fifth industrial revolution, and people are not understanding society. But at the same time, if in the first industrial revolution we are automating just a very tiny part of society and creating electricity, changing our cities. Now we're changing our bodies. Like Ben is working in a robot healthcare assistant, but we right now are starting to bioengineering people. This is happening right now. Very few people are speaking about this, but it's happening. We are right now accelerating massive, like you mentioned, the gambling part that you mentioned, Ben, and the things that you normally mentioned, that I'm completely with you. So how do you look at this from an historical perspective and present part? And this is for you, Aidan, and then we can go to Ben.
No, it's just, I think whenever there's huge pivots in history, this is clearly I do believe that the 2020s is one of those decades where rapid technological change is morphing society out of all recognition. Where we're going to be going is the decisions that we make early on, because you will find when you looked at big changes in the past, right back to the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s, there are significant influences that make it go down a certain path, and people are too close to see the domino effect of where they end up. So I think it's really important that we do get that public debate, because if you just leave it to the corporations or the governments, they're just going to do it to their own view. And of course, we know that is not going to be a pretty result. So I think if we can have a ground rush of knowledge, of interest and education, we can then make those decisions. But yeah, historically, mostly it's down to the powerful. What are the powerful doing? What are their interests? Where are they going with that? And just like the revolutions we've had this last 2 years, where people are rising up and saying, no, we don't want this. I think that's right. We can't just rely on corporations and governments to make these decisions. And people are getting empowered and are wanting to get onto the street and get this knowledge known. And I think even more frightening is the digital platforms, where there is, just like the social dilemma says, there's more influence and power than ever before. So I think we do need to get educated, and we do need to say, actually, ethically, we need to have these considerations in the public.
Completely. Ben.
Yeah, I mean, of course, history is cyclic in a way. On the other hand, technology advance is exponential, more so than cyclic. I mean, it's multiple S curves layered on top of each other. So we do have, these generational fluctuations and historical trends, but on the other hand, I'm pretty singularitarian, and I think we're heading toward a historically unprecedented situation due to advances in technology. And I also think that changes in human consciousness have been exponential, although harder to track than the processor speed or biotechnology and so forth. And I mean I think the way we think of ourselves now, the way we perceive the world, it's probably insanely different from 100 years ago, let alone 500 or 1,000 years ago. We're just very, very bad at tracking that. And I can say my experience as a scientist or programmer is totally different than 30, 40 years ago, because everything now is, go on Stack Exchange, go on forums, go into GitHub. It's all like collective processes, and you're just a neuron in the global brain, as opposed to like some crazy guy sitting there working for a year without any interaction from anyone else. So I think our tech is advancing fast. Our consciousness is changing fast, largely outside of our collective or individual reflection on how it's changing. And I think, in order to guide the technology in the right way, so we get a beneficial rather than a negative singularity, and so that we're not winding up with 10,000 rich white and Chinese guys owning everything while everyone else scrambles around subsistence farming in the rubble. I mean, we need human consciousness to uplift itself concurrently with the redirection of technology toward more compassionate and beneficial aims, which can seem like a tall order. I mean, if you look at stuff like the, say, recent U.S. presidential elections. I mean, I was a Biden supporter. I was glad he won, but just the level of discourse and the amount of sort of primitive negative emotions being thrown around on all sides, and the lack of self-reflection or awareness or attempts at genuine understanding of the situation, one could say these don't necessarily reflect optimistically on the possibility of rapid uplifting of human consciousness so that we can create a beneficial singularity. On the other hand, that the prototypical human drama is that we're supposed to undergo the hero's journey, right, and achieve the big amazing thing while overcoming our own demons and coming to fully understand ourselves while we're doing that. So I mean, we've got to do that as a collective of humanity in the next couple decades, and overcome our demons and upgrade ourselves to a more compassionate, benevolent, and reflective mode of consciousness, and in that way redirect our technology toward more beneficial aims. And if we don't, then the outcome in a few decades may be quite dire, right? And the whole narrative drama and the collective and individual psychology here is not that different than many times throughout history. What's different is that with advanced technology, like the stakes are different because technology lets small human actions have huge impacts. And now it's not just some dictator can take over his region of the world. It's like these corporate government complexes could literally assert dictatorial control over every molecule if technology advances as it seems. So the stakes are high, the odds seem sort of long and difficult, but on the other hand, in many cases, that's where human individuals and groups thrive and just happen to pull through in the end.
I think your sound disappeared, Ben.
Oh, not for me.
Now it came. I think I would probably sound
myself. Yeah.
Okay, so Ben, I think this is amazing, and I want to pick and I'm extending a bit 10 minutes more. So I think the next panel is the last one, so they will be patient, and the other part is the other time zone. So I still want to hear about this. Is quite powerful stuff. So one of the questions I have, and I think you touch let's use the example of the US election. So US elections, and then not going to political, okay? I just want to go purely in terms of data. Let's focus on data and present future. So the United States is still the first economy, at least theoretical. Probably China is already the first economy and the first leading, but the United States still has the fame. So in the space of literally the last 4 years, he lost his hegemony, and now we have still a country completely divided. That was divided mostly by technology and use of very basic machine learning algorithms, and in some cases pure social media, not even machine learning, to divide people. It worked. It worked to the point that 70 million people voted on Trump, that is accused of a lot of different things. And I'm not going right now into any geopolitics, but it's a fact. Okay, there are facts. And at the moment, these 70 million people don't believe that Biden won. It's still not consensual. So we're talking about I'm not going right now to the rest of the consequences, but this is happening as we speak. And this happened mostly because there were close to $1 billion spent on advertisement on Facebook, okay, which is the biggest tech player in terms of media in the world. And Google, probably another $1 billion that was spent close to that. So what we're talking right now is that this is happening very, very fast, but it's having massive implications. In the case of this, dividing a country to a point of meltdown. So David, you are there in the United States, both you and Ben. How do you see this as well? Someone that is very conscious of civic rights, and of course, right now looking at the data and all this part, because this is highly more complex than what we discussed. Because it's very, I think Ben mentioned a very good point. Human need to focus on our benevolence AI, which I love your concept, and as well, even the name of one of your organization, Humanity Institute or something like that, is amazing. And the Open AI. And even your Singularity Net, all these names are prophetic and they're really very important. But the point is that how can we put this in practice? So I pass to you, David, and probably will be the last wrap up with all of you, because we could go for more hours, but I want to wrap up as well on this.
Thanks, Dinis. I live 15-minute walk from the White House. I pay no attention to the nonsense. I think that Trump is a symptom, and that volatility and the discord and the bifurcation will continue. And we have a pretty dysfunctional government here. That's dysfunctional governments around the world. I think that free markets allocate resources very well. If only we had free markets. I'm actually a big fan of bottom-up solutions and letting movements take hold and letting people adopt and choose by spending, what they want. But we have these two platforms, we have two platforms. We have Apple and we have Android. And that's where, we spend our teenagers are spending 7 hours a day. And these are extractive. They're designed to use us, to manipulate us and use us as their tool. And they're designed to get what the shareholders, benefit the shareholders of those companies. And what we really are running out of in this century is choice. And whether it's Amazon or Twitter or any other thing that, we just keep gravitating toward these monster things that take away our choices. And I think the only way to do that is to try to fix the problem is to create many new possible alternatives and hope some of them win, and do some lobbying and some arguing for free markets to let the market participants figure it out, rather than regulators favoring and pushing their thumb on the table and sliding things toward bigger and bigger and bigger institutions. And that's where the innovation comes from. It comes from the bottom.
So I think I'll pass the word to all of you. So I think there was a delay from my side or stuff like that. So Aidan, Pastor Jamal, probably let you finish, Ben, because you were the last two as well coming. So Aidan, how do you see this? Because I think this is probably the biggest challenge, and I think this event is precisely to look at how can we tackle this. But we can only do this from the top bottom to really the top and the bottom and working together. So we need to work on this very, very strongly.
Is that
so Aidan first. Yeah.
What do we need to do? We're doing what this forum's doing. We need to get it in the digital economy, get it into the digital networks on social media, and actually from the grassroots, as you said, David, grassroots, let's get involved with this. Let's get it talked about. Let's disseminate, and with that, we will forge a better world, and not just think that the corporations and governments have got our best interests, because they clearly haven't.
Jamal?
Yeah, well, it's true. We need a dialogue between all the stakeholders. Public is one of them, and most of the time, the voice of the public is completely ignored. And the government, we know to what extent they are actually there to work for the benefit of the public.
And just one question on you, Jamal. So on the university side, because you are as well an academic and you are in a big university as well with a huge weight. So what do you think on that level?
Well, I think that at an academic perspective, research continue to propose all sorts of solutions, whether software, hard, technology oriented. Again, the rate of adoption is not always one that we want to see on one hand, and on the other hand, I think that there is a major issue with the availability of data. Well, actually, accessibility of data rather than availability. The data is there very often, but we can't have access to it, and there is a lack of proper regulatory frameworks. So that's another side that needs to be worked on.
So Ben, I think as a wrap up, I would like you to do the final honor. So give us a bit of your input, and I know that you've been talking about this, but as well on what you're doing, because what I love about what you're doing is that you have the theory and the practice all working together, and I think that is key. And I think probably you can mention some of your projects and the things you've been trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the higher level, there's two trends happening right now in our whole sort of emerging global brain. I mean, one is this trend of centralization and concentration of power in a few small companies and government agencies, and then databases and narrow AI systems, right? And another is the advent of decentralized peer-to-peer networks, of which the internet is an example, right? And I mean, Iran is still on the internet. We have a lot of powerful decentralization there. I mean, Linux is an example of that peer-to-peer file sharing. So what many of the projects I've been working on, ultimately, they're aimed at getting more and more of AI as we advance from narrow AI on toward AGI, getting more and more AI, to synergize with this peer-to-peer democratic self-organizing dynamic trend rather than this centralization and oligopolization trend. And so the SingularityNet platform, I'm CEO of SingularityNet Foundation. We're using blockchain to create a decentralized platform for AIs, no matter where they live and whoever may own them, to cooperate to achieve sort of emergent AI functionality. I mean, this is a tool that needs to be leveraged for good, but at least we're putting that tool out there. So I'm working on a specific general intelligence cognitive architecture called Hyperon, which is the newest version of the OpenCog architecture. And this integrates deep neural nets with logical reasoning, evolutionary learning, and a bunch of other methods. And we want to deploy this on top of this distributed sort of decentralized AI network. So if our approach to AGI in the Hyperon project works, I mean, then we're rolling that out in a democratic and decentralized way rather than within a big company's proprietary servers. Then for practical applications, I mean, I think, AI is going to apply in every single area. And, we're doing some decentralized finance stuff with a project called Singularity DAO. I mean, I think, I joke about gambling and crooked gambling, which is what I think Wall Street is. It's also the case people need financing to get their projects going, and decentralized finance is an interesting space where blockchain and AI come together. And again, you want to sort of democratize the financing of projects and the provision of liquidity rather than having it be controlled by a few entities. But then medical space, I've been spending a lot of attention on. So I mean, using both AI for discovering new therapeutics, for personalizing medicine to individuals based on their DNA, AI to sort of evaluate possible COVID-19 management policies using AI-driven agent-based modeling, which at Dinis we've talked about a bit, and then the nursing assistant robots through awakening.health. And I mean, all in all, it's an amazing time in terms of what's possible with our technologies, and frustrating in terms of getting these things rolled out, right? So I mean, you look in decentralized finance, I mean, you're sort of navigating weird regulations all over the place in terms of, well, can ordinary people do this or that thing that accredited investors are allowed to do? Like there are ways of making money that are just by law forbidden to anyone who's not rich, which is kind of insane, right? Then in medicine, as pointed out, like getting your own medical records is insanely difficult to extract your medical records from all the organizations that own them. And so because of this, as a researcher, getting medical data is hard too. Like if you want to do research on personalized medicine, like to figure out, say, given someone's medical records and their DNA, which drug or which cocktail of drugs will work for them if they have this or that problem, like getting the data to feed your AI to drive this research is insanely hard if you're not inside some pharmaceutical company. And with COVID-19 policy, I mean, all around the world, like we're all living under ridiculous, stupidly designed policies about lockdowns, or is this school open or is that school open, or are restaurants open 25%, 50% capacity? Where do these policies come from? These policies are, I mean, pardon me, like they're pulled out of the butt of some politician, right? I mean, they're made often with good intentions in mind, but the specifics are just plain made up, right? And yet we have agent-based modeling. We have scientific methodologies that at least could be used to try to scientifically evaluate which policy might work in which case, but these are never deployed, right? So I mean, on the one hand, things are progressing exponentially towards singularity. On the other hand, a lot of stuff that's possible now with technology is not widely deployed. This comes back to William Gibson's statement that like the future is here, but it's just not evenly distributed, right? And what we're seeing is the uneven distribution of the future itself guides the direction and type of advance toward the future, which is one of the problems that we're up against. But I mean, the bright side of it is, you know, there's people like the five of us gathered in this panel here who actually see this problem, who understand some of the technologies and the socioeconomic dynamics, and are trying sort of to nudge things in a more beneficial direction.
Very wise words, and I think it's a great way to wrap up this panel. So I thank you all. It's fantastic, and thank you for your time. Very busy people doing fantastic things. It's been a privilege. I think everyone listening to us, I just would like everyone to look at Ben projects, Ben interviews in YouTube, David, Aidan, Professor Jamal, because these projects are really changing the world, but as well are very practical and very benevolent, let's put it that way, which I think we need that. We need that as well to assume that practical. So thank you all for making the time. And I hope we can continue to change the world and make it a better place as well, making sure that we have singularity, not stupidity age, which I think is important as well, more than ever. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
So
Good job.
yes, thank you.
Okay.
We're going to the next one now, last one of the day. Thank you, David. You have to speak with Ben. Cheers. Thank you.